Hello to the public out there, the U.S. public. Well, we're at a point where George Herbert Walker Bush is getting away with murder. He's 93 years old. He's never been accused of the terrorist bombing. He masterminded the bombing of the Cubana airliner when he was head of the CIA back in '76. He later pardoned the two anti-Castro Cubans who put the camera bombs on the plane in Barbados, which blew up on the way to Venezuela. The two anti-Castro Cubans were put in prison in Venezuela. Later, the guards turned their noses to the wall. The prisoners walked out, got in a speeding car, which was a CIA operation, and they were sped off and later ended up in the United States, which harbored these guys who blew up a Cubana airliner with 73 people on board, coming back from the Olympics, even including 5 Koreans and the 34 teenage member of the Cuban fencing team, the entire teenage Cuban fencing team. So Bush has never been charged with this, but except in Cuba, he's wanted for murder. There's no statute of limitations on murder in Cuba, but that's not the biggest problem for George Bush Sr. Uh, Ever since Oswald was shot in Dallas, accused of killing Officer Tippit, there's been nothing but lies from the fake news media, which was pretty much controlled by, it had to be the CIA and the Secret Service because Kennedy signed an order to start pulling the Green Beret out of Vietnam. He would have been out by '65, and to pull the CIA out and dismantle the CIA. This order was signed in '63 on Air Force One, at which time the order went out from CIA to kill Jack Kennedy by sending 3 ex-Marine sharpshooters to Dallas to pose as guards. Um, Oswald had a double in the CIA. He had nothing to do with shooting Kennedy. He was eating lunch on the other side of the building when Kennedy was shot. He was arrested on the second floor of the TSBD when Kennedy was shot. He never left the building. Tippit was supposed to shoot Oswald. Instead, he chickened out at the last minute, and Oswald was later shot by Jack Ruby, but 2 CIA ops shot Tippit. So the only woman who shot Tippit saw a short, fat, bald man running towards a bus. Her testimony was never used. Instead, 6 people who didn't see who shot Tippit's testimony was used. Mark Lane went through the entire FBI report that was sealed for 25 years using the Freedom of Information Act. So went through every paper and every box. So redacting that bunch of crap is ridiculous. But who's in charge? Who gets their daily CIA briefing? What ex-president? The only ex-president who cares about the CIA briefing is George Herbert Walker Bush. Let's talk about Bush Sr. a minute. He was in the CIA, recruited from Yale. He was the youngest pilot in the Navy in World War II. He bailed out of a Liberator, leaving his co-pilots sealed in. When the cockpit slid back, they could not bail out, and they apparently died in that Liberator. They were never found. But he claims they got out. He claims this plane was on fire. The people flying planes near him said that his plane was smoking. It was not on fire. But anyway, Bush Sr. starts his life with the kind of the shadow over his head of those two co-pilots who died because he bailed out because he was a chicken shit. I always thought he was a wimp from the first time I heard him when he was running for president, when he wanted to escalate the military budget. Anyway, let's see, 68? Okay. So what did he do? He got it in, Nixon got in '68. So Reagan didn't get in until like 80. Okay, so it was like years later. But Nixon got in '68 and escalated the war in Vietnam. There was 4,000 dead John Kerry said in '68, at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year, there was 13,000 dead. That was the last year Johnson was president. Okay, let's go back to the Kennedy assassination. Who was in charge of the JFK assassination? According to Cohen, now I can't remember, E. Howard Hunt, excuse me. E. Howard Hunt told his son before he died that it was a CIA op to kill Kennedy, Operation 40, to blame it on Castro, to get people mad enough to kill Castro, because Kennedy was too gutless to kill Castro. So Bush Sr. was in charge of the Bay of Pigs op in 1961, which failed. There was 1,200 anti-Castro Cubans who were captured, and to get them back, Kennedy had to talk to Khrushchev 6 months later, de-target the Soviet Union from Turkey with our ICBMs to get these anti-Castro troops back. But the operation failed, and Kennedy fired Allen Dulles, who was head of the CIA, who was a crooked lawyer, with his brother John Foster Dulles, who together helped launder Hitler's stolen billions with the Bush family, who owned a branch of a bank in New York. I think it must have been a Chase branch, because Chase got a third of the Hitler's stolen billions. The Bush family got their fortune from this money. Fritz Thyssen was the German steel company that bought out Krupp Steel, that financed Hitler in World War II, that financed Kaiser Wilhelm in World War I. Fritz Thyssen's family had 3 private banks, one in Berlin, one in Rotterdam, one in New York, and these were Hitler's stolen billions. For the Allies looked for the money in foreign banks. It wasn't in foreign banks, it was in private banks. They never found this money. And I think the $200 million check that was given to Nazi General Master Spy Reinhard Gehlen to start espionage in the Soviet Union, when he was hired by Allen Dulles to work for the CIA. Dulles hired 4,000 Nazis in 1947. As soon as Truman signed the NSA bill, we had Nazis working in the CIA who Hitler had told to create a famine inside the Soviet Union and starve 40 million Soviets to death and enslave the other 90 million. So, United States and UK, this never happened, but Gehlen was in charge of our NATO intelligence in Berlin, and I think when Kennedy talked to Khrushchev, Khrushchev had no idea that Kennedy was being told that if the Soviets took the entire city of Berlin, that there wouldn't be a nuclear war that would kill 70 million people. I think that was propaganda from the Nazis. But basically, Gehlen and the Nazis started the Cold War almost single-handedly. NATO was supposedly going to contain the Soviet Union using our B-52s, which the Soviets couldn't afford B-52s, so they used ICBM. So there was a missile gap when Kennedy ran against Nixon in 1960, although Nixon apparently was unaware that the Soviets had ICBMs, which were solid fuel rockets, by the way. But and their solid fuel was based on powdered aluminum and ammonium perchlorate, which has like 5 oxygens or something. Anyway, that ammonium perchlorate was later dumped after the Cold War, 140 million tons of it into 10 U.S. waterways, where it spread to 15, then 20, then 30, then all the lower 48 waterways. That chemical disrupts the thyroid gland's uptake of iodide, so it causes low thyroid, which is low metabolism, which would cause weight gain, which I think is what caused the obesity epidemic, although the government had a no test, no tell policy, and it's now in all the states. So since it's, although fast food may be killing us, it couldn't be proven, but the ammonium perchlorate is a proven metabolism lower. Meanwhile, we had 4,000 Nazis were smuggled into Fort Hunt, Virginia, which is a secret fort uh, below the Potomac on the other side of the river. And then when Israel started a war in '67 to take the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, etc., with Egypt, they preemptively struck Egypt. First, they went around Israel blowing up stuff in Arab countries, making it look like the Arab countries did it. When the Arabs got ready to go to war with Egypt, with Israel, they took the Israel invaded, preemptively struck the West Bank, took the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Desert, and then they lied to Jordan, telling Jordan that uh, Egypt had conquered Israel. When Jordan sent troops into Israel, they took the West Bank. They were getting ready to do the same thing to Syria to take the Golan Heights when we had an NSA spy ship off the coast of Tel Aviv in 12-mile waters, unarmed except for a 50 caliber machine gun. We told the Israelis we heard them lying to the Jordanians, telling them that Egypt had conquered Israel. Uh, so then the Jordans sent troops into Israel, and Israel took the West Bank. That land and the Golan Heights, Israel never intends to give back. Meanwhile, we don't want them building settlements there. Now they've discovered oil on the Golan Heights. Israel, by the way, waged by lying, and the Mossad has its top agents here under deep cover with perfectly forged passports coming out of Canada, um, out of Toronto and Montreal into New York and D.C., where they under deep cover, but using a simple cover, they easily get on the cocktail circuits and collect sex scandals, drug scandals, money scandals on U.S. congressmen. And if they can't get to the congressman, they go through the influential aides. So they have control of the majority of Congress by way of blackmail, coercion, and bribery. So they're bribing Congress. They were getting $3 billion a year cash every year to build on the West Bank. Now they're getting $4 billion. They asked for $5 billion, and we're letting them build. We're not supposed to be letting them build because Obama did not veto the UN resolution condemning their building on the West Bank, but then Trump got in, and now Nikki Haley is pulled out of the UN Human Rights Committee because she doesn't like this bashing of Israel. Okay, so it was ragging on Israel. I don't know what you want to call it, but meanwhile, Nikki Haley's parents are both Sikhs from India, and the Sikhs have been accused of terrorism in northern India, and they were trained by the British to be sharpshooters, but and they were Hindus, but they were told they weren't Hindus, that they're somehow better than the Hindus. So, that's one of the big lies told. So it's hard to believe. Why is a first generation American who's usually super patriotic, why is she in control of our ambassadorship to the UN? Because Trump is a anti-political walking clusterfuck. I mean, Trump has bombed Syria with no evidence. Uh, he's doing everything the Israelis want him to do. So, if he did something they didn't like, then they have since convinced him to do stuff they do like. The Mossad does not want peace. It wants war, unconditional surrender. It started the civil war in Syria. It prefers ISIS to Assad. It put a transmitter in Benghazi, Libya, back in '86 that said that Libya blew up the jet at Lockerbie. Hillary ate the bologna then, and she's still eating it in the last election, saying that Libya killed Americans at Lockerbie. Libya had nothing to do with it. Meanwhile, Reagan bombed Benghazi, and now Obama has bombed Benghazi, and now they've killed Gaddafi, And Libya is now a basket case, whereas it was a paradise under Gaddafi, believe it or not. You can look it up. I can give you the details, but I don't feel like going into it right now. But meanwhile, I got on here to talk about Bush Sr. Bush Sr. is 93, should have been arrested a long time ago for masterminding the murder of JFK. He was in charge of Operation 40 with Richard Nixon to kill Kennedy and blame it on Castro. And execute someone, you first have to have a fair trial and accuse them and convict them of murder in order to be able to execute them. Although those of us who are against capital punishment think that if the state's allowed to execute people, then it's not long where ordinary citizens think they've got the same right to execute people. So if you really think all killing is wrong, you shouldn't be executing anybody. But be that as it may, war trades men for gold. War sends men back in urns full of ashes, wept with many a tear. War is hell. So we have been at war on and off since before I was born. We were let's say, who was it? Truman started the Korean War after the Nazis said he was soft on communism, that he lost Red China. He said, I'll show you how soft on communism I am, invade Korea. So we were, and then Eisenhower shut that war down in '53. Eisenhower did not want a war with Russia or China, and Israel wants to keep Russia as our ally, so we will keep Russia as our enemy. But basically, Russia's not our enemy, and Israel has been framing Russia and trying to frame Putin ever since Putin got in power. When Gorbachev was opening up friendly relations with the United States and Reagan was over there, Israel didn't like this opening up friendly relations with the USSR. Then we wouldn't need Israel as an ally anymore. So keeping Israel as our ally, keeping itself as our ally, is a major job of one of the major jobs of the Israeli Mossad. So we since then have, well, now NATO's getting ready to go to war with Europe, and it doesn't like this Putin talk that Trump is setting up for July. It's afraid that, by the way, if we were allied with Russia, we would have $2 a gallon gasoline. Trump wants cheaper gasoline to stimulate the economy, and every time the economy started taking off, he mentioned when Obama was president that the gasoline price would go up. So now that it's up $2.50 or something a gallon, it could go higher, and I think Trump is putting sanctions back on Iran, so their oil will go back up. So we really need to, well, first of all, the Israelis have lied about Iraq, they're lying about Iran, and all this hype about Iran and Russia is exactly that. So it's almost like you can't tell the truth if you're on the news in America. So you get your news off YouTube. Okay, so if you have, you can look at who wanted Kennedy dead, who wanted JFK dead on my Facebook page. Look, I'm Daniel Anthony Russo. Look for JFK murder solved by the books. Look for the lowdown on China. Look, Allen Dulles was a traitor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's so much material out there that it's not hard to prove anything I'm saying. However, the FBI has shut down 120 investigations of Israelis, so somebody in the FBI is in control. Now it's time for me to go, so I'm going to go.